Chapter 4, Infant Terrible, Part 3, Jasper. Midrash number 3, The Tribe of Benjamin, 2 of 2. We are all Benjamin. Title, Benjamin's and Joseph's Story as a Metaphor for Our Relationship with Jesus. Title, Benjamin's and Joseph's Story as a Metaphor for Our Relationship with Jesus. 1. We are redeemed as Benjamin was by Judah, who accepted his punishment onto himself in exchange for his release. Genesis 43, verse 8 through 10. 2. We had a Goliath-like enemy we could not defeat, sin, that Jesus defeated by not committing. David redeemed the tribe of Benjamin from Goliath. 3. We were an enemy of God, crippled by sin, but we were healed and taken into the kingdom by the Lord. David, the scion of tribe of Judah, gave Mephibosheth a perpetual seat at the king's table. Mephibosheth was technically his enemy, the scion of the tribe of Benjamin, and crippled by a fall. 2 Samuel 9, verse 7. Like Jesus, Joseph was thrown into a pit and then became ruler over all, second to Pharaoh, or in Jesus' case, second to God the Father. 5. Joseph was thrown into a pit for it to lead him to Egypt. He paid the price of sin so that many could be saved. Quote, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive, as they are today. Genesis 50, verse 20. The dual aspect of Joseph speaks of the dual aspect and paradox of the Messiah. He suffers greatly to atone for Israel, and yet he is to be exalted, even to the right hand of God. Messiah ben Joseph and Messiah ben David in one person. As the Messiah is the soul of Israel, whatever happens to the Messiah will happen to Israel. Reference Rashi on Genesis 35, Volume 1, Missouri Publishers, page 395. Title, Future Implications. Of all his children, Jacob named only Benjamin. Rachel originally named him Ben-Oni, meaning son of my emptiness, for she was dying due to his birth. Before she died, Jacob grabbed Rachel's hand and said that he was renaming Benjamin to son of my right hand, and wrote his name in such a way that within it would be 2 Hebrew letter yods, for yod in Hebrew also means hands, one hand for Rachel and the other for his own, grasping the other in a symbolic gesture of love. In times of sorrow, the Torah writes Benjamin's name with only 1 yod, and in times of happiness with 2. Before Jacob's death, when he prophesies the end of the world, Benjamin's name is written with 2 yods. When Jacob died, he was reunited with Rachel, as will mankind be reunited with their Creator in the New Jerusalem. Reference, 2 hands for Benjamin and Looking at Leah by Jeremy Chance Springfield. If Rachel's name of Ben-Oni predicted the coming exile in Egypt, then Jacob's naming of Benjamin, meaning the son of the right hand, looked forward to the coming redemption, as it is said, quote, the Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. Psalm 110, verse 1. Tradition says that as Jacob died, his 12 children, who would make up the 12 tribes of Israel, stood around him in the same formation that the Israelite tribes traveled around the tabernacle during the 40 years in the desert. The formation was reminiscent of a cross. End of Midrash. Setting, 2230 A.D., the town of Neam. Perspective, Bandog. Following a couple leads, Bandog eventually found the girl. She was sitting alone along the side of an old mining tunnel. She had a fire going and was covering herself with ash from the pit. He was confused as to why she was doing this, but when he saw her mix some of the charcoal into her bowl of food, he realized that it was activated charcoal, and she was using it as a sunscreen to protect herself from the radiation. Eating it would also help absorb the poison in her food. Since World War III, the world was poisonous and radioactive. This was probably the only way she survived for so long without conditioning. Bandog wondered how she learned to do this. Iskandar did not want people to know that natural remedies existed, so he hid that knowledge. Iskandar needed people to believe that only scientists and doctors provided healing. An old blanket covered the floor of the tunnel. Just beyond the fire pit sat a bucket of water and a makeshift washing area and kitchen. It was surprising how resourceful a 6-year-old could be. He also wondered just how lonely it must be. Perhaps it was the birds that made her feel as if she had a purpose. Or maybe the birds were just a substitute for friends.
Who taught you to do that?
She looked as if she had been crying, but he wasn't sure.
When I put this on, I don't feel so sick all the time.
His reappearance didn't seem to upset her, even though she had just watched him kill one of her bird friends.
You don't have to feel so sick. If you come with me, the institution will fix you.
Disastrous withdrawal symptoms and ailments were built into the conditioning treatments to keep people from leaving Artopia. Luckily, conditioning could easily reverse these symptoms. Tosh considered it for a moment, as she often did. But then she thought of her friend Farah and her past life in the Artopian biolabs. Tosh also thought about the things her mother told her about conditioning.
They think I'm crazy, she'd say to her. The pharmaceutical industry is marred by more suspicion, morbid curiosity, and dark alchemical fascinations than anything a madman can think up.
Her mother taught Tosh everything she knew about the world, but now she was gone. Tosh would honor her mother and Farah by resisting conditioning, and she would try to spare Neom from the same fate of Edoran.
I do not care if conditioning will cure me. I will not do it. I must stay here and convince everyone to follow me into the woods. Don't you know what's going to happen soon? You have to leave this town.
Why should I leave?
He asked, but she just shook her head and was about to say something when Bandog interrupted.
No, I do not want to hear about your birds. Find me another and I will surely shoot it.
The curiosity he felt soured inside of him. He felt that the girl was stupid. It wasn't normal. She should not care for him or the town after the way they treated her. Perhaps it was due to the radiation she was exposed to, or some sort of brain parasite like what the man said at the bar.
You should hate me and the town. They want to get rid of you like how I got rid of your bird.
Tosh didn't seem offended, but nodded her head.
People do say I'm wrong, because I count the birds and I'm still alive when my town is not. They think I have a disease. Still, I count because when the birds are leaving, I know something bad is coming. Just as they can sense that a storm is about to hit, they can understand things that I cannot. Birds can hear and see things we cannot. They can hear earthquakes forming beneath the earth. I know because I watch them and remember how they act before disasters hit, like those electrical storms. We cannot understand the birds, but we can listen to them. The town only hates me, sir, because they cannot understand me.
Bandog marveled how a girl with such terrible vision and hearing could, through the birds, hear and see better than anyone else in the town. The girl did not look well. The fur on her arms and back was patchy and gone in places, resembling the mange, but was most likely something much worse.
How can you tell the difference between the real birds and the robotic ones?
I can tell by which ones eat and which ones don't. I always fed the birds, and so they know me and come to me in the mornings.
Perhaps the birds leaving is a sign that this town is doomed. Still, they are just birds. Birds can't stop a town from being destroyed. You saw how easily I killed your sparrow. Why not just let them disappear and follow them into the wilderness?
My mom said man was thrown out of paradise, but they don't ever say anything about the birds. She said that the birds fly back to heaven when we're not looking, and then back again all the time. I know that the birds talk to God when they fly to heaven. The birds can plead for us. They can plead to God to spare our town.
The birds don't talk to God. God is a made-up bedtime story savages tell their children to make them behave. It's my job to rid the world of such fear-mongering fairy tales, because people who believe in them begin to act irrationally and eventually turn into monsters.
Tosh shrugged her shoulders.
I know the birds know how to get to paradise, because a rainbow-colored one led me to safety when my town was destroyed. Sometimes, my mama would see me playing outside and feeding the birds. She would tell me to run away with them into the wilderness and not return. So one day I did. It was my mom telling me to follow those birds that saved my life.
As a high-class general, Bandog knew a little about the story of Eden, but was just enough to know how silly the stories were and how backward the people who believed in them were. Perhaps all the girl had to hang on to was her delusions. From her account, it did not seem like even her mother liked her.
How did the birds help you survive Edoran's destruction?
Iskander's war tactics ensured there were never any survivors, as that was the only way to ensure he could fix all the sequence of events.
Well,
said Tosh,
one morning, birds did not come when I threw the bread out for them. This never happened before, so I went out to the edge of the wilderness to look for them. It was there that I saw the men. One of them motioned me to come over, but I was scared and ran back into the house and called out for my mom. The men followed and attacked us. We ran, but before I could get away, one of the soldiers grabbed me. My mom could have escaped, but she came back for me. She grabbed him and threw him off. Then she said one last time, "Follow the birds, follow them, and don't look back." I knew that this time she was serious in trying to protect me, not get rid of me. So I ran into the wilderness. The soldiers looked for me as I hid. One of them said, "Just leave her. The town's gonna be destroyed anyway. The creatures will get her." So I ran away even deeper into the woods, but I missed my mom. I was lost for a long time until I saw the fires and was able to follow them back. The place where my home had once been was all burnt up, and there were black shadow creatures in the street. I looked and looked for my mom amongst the rubble until I saw the thing that they call the ersatz seer. I hid in the ashes of my home, buried myself so deep I was completely covered. I'd stayed like that for hours until I was sure it was gone. The ash protected me from the ersatz. Afterwards, I ran into the wilderness again. I was too scared to stay in Ederon. I looked and looked for birds but couldn't find them. I prayed to God to let me see what the birds see, just one time, so I could go to where they were. I would have been lost forever if it wasn't for one bird, a rainbow-colored one that lit me a path. I thought it would lead me right to heaven. Instead, it led me here, to this abandoned tunnel, and I knew that this must be my home for now. Like my last, there is ash here to protect me. Since my mother took me out of conditioning, I felt very sick. But I stopped feeling sick after that night. I realized that the ash protected me, like sunscreen, or like the way it protected me from the ersatz seer. I wish I did not have to run and hide from the black shadows. I wish I knew how to fight them. But for now, all I know is that we must run away. Me, you, and the town. Just like the last day Ederon existed. No birds came when I threw bread out this morning. No birds, that is, besides Jasper.
There are no such creatures as rainbow-colored birds, said Bandog. He thought of whose child she might have been, but she was so ragged and feral-looking she did not look like anyone he had ever known. He wondered if it was his soldiers that attacked her and her mom, but he didn't get the orders to destroy the town until later that day. In truth, he knew who she was, his daughter Kitty, but he didn't want to accept it. He didn't have to. He decided that he would save Tosh without ever acknowledging her true patronage, for to do so would have too many implications. Instead, he'd take her far away from Niam before it was destroyed. She'd be forced to condition once in the central city. At first, she would protest, but the mental health medications would make her complacent and stable. From that point, she'd be educated and taken care of by the state. She would have a happy, uncomplicated life as an Artopian, and he could go back to his everyday existence.
There are such things as rainbow-colored birds,
argued Tosh.
Most birds are rainbow-colored, but we can't see the rainbows unless something reveals them. Like a mist of water reveals the rainbows in the sky. A bird's heart is larger than a person's. They can hear the wind on the other side of the city, and they can see the hidden rainbows in colors that no human has ever seen. Someone told me it's because birds have more cones in their eyes, but I think it's because of their larger hearts. I think the night Niam was destroyed, I was given the ability to see what the birds see. That's how I was able to see the birds' iridescence. Since that night, I haven't seen the rainbows, but Jasper still can. He is trying to show us the way to paradise, and he's pleading to God to save us. He brings me shiny stones from heaven's walls, so I know that paradise isn't far.
The only place that is paradise is the institution. It has the power to make the world an Eden. That is why I am here. I am here to create an Artopian paradise.
You don't have to create Eden. It doesn't even cost anything to go there. Where else do you think all the birds are flying off to?
Stupid girl, he said in a rational heat of anger, ignoring her frivolous words. If the birds are flying away from something, they are flying away from me. For it is I who bring the fire and death that created the ersatz seer. Keeping a few birds here will not stop the inevitable from happening, and you are stupid to think it will. He yelled, surprised at his anger. Then the girl thought and said,
Well, then you will have to get rid of your fire and stop destroying things so that the birds won't have to fly away, and I won't have to convince everyone to follow them, so the townfolk won't be bothered by me anymore, and then you will understand where it is they go and get to see what it is they see.
Bandog felt something knock him backwards as his anger consumed him. A rickety old barn door opened up inside him, and something scaly and lithe came slithering through.
It is too late. You don't hear the armies advancing over the fields. Can't you see the fields swaying back and forth with their approach? Today this town burns, and I trample you and the people into dust, and there are no more birds or words that you can use to warn them, for they are already mine.
Bandog laughed and then stepped back, shocked by his rage. The shadows seemed to grow darker, and a strong wind caused the sands to swirl. Tosh read once that the serpent was cursed to eat the dust, and if what Bandog said was true, the snakes would soon be feasting. She looked at the town.
I remember exactly what it all looked and sounded like in Ederon.
Tears welled up in her eyes, and she trembled.
Run away, then. It is about to happen again. Save yourself, little girl.
Bandog growled in menace.
She will run away, and I will find her later and have my soldiers drag her back to Artopia, he thought. She cried and turned away towards the wilderness. There was nothing else she could do. Bandog smiled, knowing he won, but then she turned around.
No, I don't have to run away anymore as I did in Edoron. I couldn't help my mom then, but I can help the town now. Don't you see? We all still have a chance while there is still one left.
She pointed up into the tree. Where she pointed was a crow with blue eyes.
This is Jasper, and he is proof that we can all enter paradise and live in peace forever and ever.
She was so proud of him. In Tasha's eyes, Jasper had become the crow Noah first sent out of the ark. Her mother told her that the crow did not come back. She imagined it was because he was here right now, just for this moment, so that he could give this man the proof of the fulfillment of the accumulative promise of the God of everything. The dove brought back an olive leaf to prove Earth exists, and her crow brought back a crystal from out of the sky to prove that heaven exists.
Proof?
Bandog laughed. In the crow's beak was a polished white stone. He dropped it, and it rolled to Bandog's feet.
It's just a pebble.
It's a pebble from paradise. He flew up into the sky and plucked it from heaven's walls.
Enough of this. Leave now, and the bird will follow you out of here. If you don't, I will shoot it right now. He took out his gun and pointed it at the bird as he had done to the sparrow.
If I do, then the town will lose their last bird. Don't you know what that will mean? It means they will all burn and turn into abominations.
She had trouble pronouncing the word. She was crying. Tears poured from her face.
We must all leave this place together. Me, you, Jasper, and all the townspeople. We can all find a better place far away from here. I know it's out there, the place where all the rainbow-colored birds fly to. We will get to see what they see. We will see God.
She pointed at the bird and then someplace above it. Before he knew it, Bandog lowered his gun, and she stopped weeping. He had seen something where she pointed, but he wasn't sure what. A flash of color in the sky. When he looked back at the girl, he thought he saw another flash of color, orange, amongst her ashen gray fur. He shook his head and rubbed his eyes until everything was gray once again.
You would sacrifice your beloved pet just to save those miserable people?
He asked, dejected. He heard the townspeople say she raised a crow, treated it like her child.
He isn't just a pet,
she thought, and asked in all sincerity.
Do you know what it's like to love and care for a child?
He looked back where his troops were preparing for war, and then back to the girl. But when he looked at her, he knew he was seeing his own child, risen from the dead. She looked at the bird so happy once she realized he would not shoot it.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Her face glowed.
If you tell the townspeople to leave, they will be sure to. We will find the place all the birds have disappeared to. I have something to help us. Jasper brought them to me, 12 multicolored stones, turquoise, topaz, onyx. I keep them in my dress pocket, but look, together they glow beautiful rainbow light. Sometimes the light forms words.
Bandog turned away from the girl, not needing to see any more. She had somehow convinced them to spare the town. Perhaps if the town didn't burn as she predicted, then she would know that counting birds meant nothing. She would cry and fight at first, but she would be given the best Artopia had to offer, and she would be happy. Forced to be happy, she would have no choice once conditioning took over. He was committing treason by sparing the town, because doing so halted the construction of the institution, and failure to build the institution on time could mean death for all Artopia. He did not care. He was only thinking of himself. If I can save them, then I can save Tosh, he thought. Bandog lived with the images of carnage that he had induced. Pictures that said 1,000 words, and 1,000 words that rendered 1,000 visual horrors, and 1,000,000 more words and 1,000,000,000 more visual horrors that screamed vengeance, hate, and death, all of which begged for the intention of their creator, but he could only look away in shame and betray himself. He saw his platoon arise from the mire, all 100 or so in glistening black plastic biovests. They met him with impatient stares as they waited for his command to attack. Just this one time, and never again, he reassured himself. He would go against orders.
Retreat! The Purple Death is here. The whole town is disease-ridden. Iskandar does not need us. They will all be consumed by infection soon enough.
He ordered his armies to withdraw. The soldiers left, and the town was safe. He was a hero.
He sat tall and proud on his Utah Raptor horse as his soldiers marched back to Iskandar. Iskandar would understand. He listened to everything Bandog said. Bandog was held in high esteem and respected, and he could spare human lives if it fitted him. He held the power of life and death. "Ah!" Bandog hollered. The pain forced him to stop recollecting. Something was happening to him. He sat up from his bed, but then another spasm caused him to tumble onto the floor, where he groveled for a moment. With the recovering of his memories came his mutations, and he was remembering something terrible. He grasped his face as his muzzle dislocated and flattened even more into his skull. He rolled over and pressed his back onto the floor as his body contorted at an impossible angle. When he got up, he had to put all his weight on his more muscular back legs. Heaving in exhaustion, he used the bed to support himself as he limped to the two-way mirror, a deep growl rumbling in his throat.
"I am what you are all meant to become."
He snarled at the scientists observing him from the other side of the reflection. He strained against his chains and threw his dinner tray at the mirror.
"You won't set me free because you have never dared to be."
He hollered before he collapsed onto the ground. He tried to howl, but the sound came out as a guttural gasp as he cried because the pain of changing was terrible, and also because of what he was remembering. He was not like the typical monster, not the ones Iskandar wanted people to see, that were more like human chimeras, humans with the body parts of different animals. He had lost many of his animal characteristics. They were being replaced by something else, something void and without character. In the eyes of Artopia, he was the worst kind of monster. Something out of a horror movie. He once looked like a respectable shepherd, but now he was a hideous werewolf, a vampire, something alien, something not animal, not at all natural. He left the mirror and sat back down to look outside again. He was looking for something, searching the sky for a miracle. He heard stories of a rainbow city, a city that glowed and burned with a rainbow polychromatic fire, as beautiful, they say, as the clearest cut jasper. He desperately wanted to see the rainbow light, but he couldn't. He was like the thousands of Artopians who couldn't see Armageddon, the giant floating castle in the sky. He couldn't see them because of what happened after he returned from leading his army away. He saw the town that Tosh had worked so hard to save. They had her caged on top of a locustroid with a sign that said "Monster" that dangled on the creature's abdomen by a rusted nail. When he approached the crowd, he yelled with all his fury,
"What is this? What is this?"
because he knew that this act was wrong, no matter how much they despised the girl. She had saved their lives. No, they did not know that she had saved them. Bandog could tell them, and they would believe him, but then they would know that he was a true monster if he told them. What would he do then? They had respected him, and he was proud of that. He could not let them live to spread rumors about him and army attacking and killing its own citizens.
Maybe I just kill the entire town now and save her.
He thought. But he knew he couldn't because he had already sent his army away. He could get them again, but he wouldn't have time to destroy the town before they spread the truth to the rest of Artopia, and his army would know that he had lied. Between him and the pen stood the mayor of the town. There was a scratch above his eye where some fur was missing.
Is this the scratch that Tosh gave him?
He thought. It looked to be showing signs of mutation. The locust droid creaked under the weight of the cage.
"We are going to exile the monster,"
said the mayor,
"to be tied to a raft and sent to drift out to sea, or else she will infect us all with her disease. Just look at her. She is already turning,"
he said through clenched teeth. And that is when Bandog did the thing that changed his life forever, as the shadows grew and held him by his feet with long serrated talons. Nothing. He did nothing but stand there as the town carried Tosh away. If he did something, he would be discovered for what he was, and he couldn't have that. The townsfolk called Tosh monster, thief, and a liar, then brought her to the sea, tied her to a raft with heavy chains, and sent her adrift. He watched as the rift carried her far away towards the storm clouds in the distance.
"She'll be fine,"
said the waitress he had overheard at the bar. "Some boat will pick her up," said someone else. Well-meaning townspeople nodded their heads in agreement, not wanting to admit what they had done. It was later that night that the storm hit. It cast up 10-foot waves in places, washing away much of the beach.
The mountains protected Niam from being dragged into the sea, but the mountains couldn't protect Niam from Iskandar. Being dragged into the sea by a millstone would have been a better fate than what would befall them. When Niam did not die out from the purple death, Iskandar decided to plant the town with a different disease. Soon, all the townspeople became infected and turned into mindless monsters. Iskandar took their power core and finished the construction of the institution. The people of Niam remained in the mountains as monsters. They lived off the land and devoured those unlucky enough to be banished there by Iskandar. The mountains acted as a mountain security force, deterring any invasion of Artopia and keeping anyone from leaving for that matter. Iskandar always got people to pay homage to him, but not Tosh. After the storm ended, only the remains of a raft and a red ribbon washed up onto the rocky coast. He picked up that red ribbon and kept it on him ever since. Tosh's crow flew over the scene, calling forlornly. Later they killed him too. They killed their rainbow-colored crow. Just like that, Bandog is no longer in the dream. He is back in a hospital bed 10 years later. The years of suppressed mutations changed him almost overnight. He was becoming just like Tosh. He spent the past 10 years secretly spoiling military raids and filling out false reports to save the underground people and others like them who revolted or refused to condition. All the while, he slowly mutated. But it was in such a way that he could conceal his sickness. No longer was that possible. He could no longer hide behind a uniform. He wanted to do something, but he didn't know what. His restlessness caused him to scratch his body until the hair fell off, and all that was left was mangy patches. The energy inside him was growing every day. The only things that helped calm him were push-ups and calisthenics that he could do inside the tiny room. He was surprised at the way his new muscles worked. His back straightened only an hour ago, but his thigh muscles were already thick enough to hold the weight. He was preparing for something big that was about to happen. He wasn't sure what, but he could hear the scientists and doctors speak of it. He listened as they watched him through the double-sided glass and the hidden cameras. They were curious about the progression of his mutations. Sometimes he heard them discuss what better uses they could put the bodies to. They spoke of experiments and truth, and they nodded their heads the same way the dry wind blew through the naked trees. He looked outside. The digital sky was no longer crystal clear. Streaks of static-like lightning played off the beautiful projection. The storm was battling the sky dome hard, shooting white static lightning here and there whenever the rains hit the atmospheric-like telescreen particularly hard. Iskandar was trying to hide the storm from the Artopians, but he couldn't hide the reality of it completely. The storm was as bad as the storm that killed Tosh. He wondered if the words he read in one of his stolen books were true. Tosh had given him the idea to pick up the book and read it, and it was one of the few verses he couldn't forget. The sea gave up its dead, and death and the grave gave up their dead, and all were judged according to their deeds. Revelation 20, verse 13. And all were judged according to their deeds. Revelation 20, verse 13. Perhaps, thought Bandog, someday the sea will rage tremendously enough to wash up and give its back to Artopian shores. Seeing how many Artopia had killed, that would be a terrifying day for everyone. The world had become horrible, and he did not pity the dead. Still, he wished for just one speck of hope, for one act of rebellion against it all before that fearful day of judgment.
If only,
Bandog prayed.
if only the sea could give back just one.